They say if you're ever in Beijing and you miss the last train, don't take bus 375, especially if it's past midnight, because if you do, you might not make it home. This story has been whispered for decades in China, passed along in low voices, especially by late-night workers. It's written off as an urban legend, just another ghost tale told to scare people from being out too late. But what makes this story different is how specific it is, and how the records, what little remain, never quite line up. It happened on November 14th, 1995, a freezing, still night in Beijing. Most of the city had gone to sleep. The streets were nearly silent, save for the occasional hum of traffic lights and the moan of wind slipping between high-rises. And somewhere near the old summer palace, Yuanmingyuan, a final bus was preparing to depart. Route 375, headed toward Xiangshan, the fragrant hills. It was the last trip of the night, one that shouldn't have been remarkable in any way, except for what happened next. At the wheel sat Liu Peng, a man in his early 40s. Quiet, predictable. He'd driven this route for nearly a decade without incident. He knew every stop, every blind turn, and every drunk college kid who tried to argue their way out of a fare. Beside him sat Xu Lan, the route conductor. Stern, practical, and not known for small talk. If you stepped onto her bus, you paid your fare and sat down. No nonsense. That night, they expected nothing unusual. But within minutes of departing, they realized this ride wouldn't be like the others. There were just a few passengers on board, an elderly woman bundled in heavy shawls and a scarf wrapped tight around her face. She didn't speak, just shuffled slowly to her seat near the front. A young couple, maybe early 20s. He was jittery, anxious. She leaned sleepily against his arm. Neither of them looked around. Neither of them smiled. And a solitary man sat alone toward the back, thin, quiet, face pale under the flickering overhead lights. The engine groaned as they pulled away from the stop, the kind of low diesel growl that made every window vibrate faintly. The roads were nearly empty, just long stretches of quiet black lined with frost-covered trees and dim street lamps. No one spoke. It was too late for conversation, and that silence might have lasted the entire ride, if they hadn't stopped near the Haidian suburbs. Just after they passed the last stretch of city housing, the road curved sharply, leading into a dim, forested corridor where the lamps were spaced far too far apart, and in the distance, standing dead center in the road, were three figures. The driver hit the brakes hard. The bus screeched as it slowed, tires skidding slightly over ice-slicked pavement. The conductor gripped the rail. Everyone on the bus leaned forward, staring out the windshield. At first, no one moved. The figures, whoever they were, just stood there, still, waiting. Then, slowly, they stepped forward. They boarded. No one said a word. There were three of them, two men walking stiffly, almost in unison, supporting a third figure between them, whose head was bowed low and whose arms hung limply at his sides. But it wasn't just their posture that unsettled the passengers. It was their clothing. They weren't wearing jackets, no jeans, no boots, no gloves. They were dressed in full Qing dynasty robes, rich, layered silks, embroidered cuffs, long sleeves that trailed with every step. Red and black cloth gleamed faintly in the overhead light. They looked like something pulled out of a museum exhibit, something meant to be behind glass. But they were right there, on the bus. Their faces were too pale, waxy. Their skin had a strange yellow-gray cast, like old candles left in the dark too long. And their eyes didn't blink. The first man dropped a handful of coins into the fare box. The conductor watched, frozen, and the three figures walked to the very back of the bus. The one in the middle never raised his head. For several long minutes, no one spoke, not even the conductor. Eventually, she forced a nervous chuckle. "Probably stage actors," she said, barely loud enough to carry over the rattle of the bus. "Maybe a late rehearsal." No one laughed. The young couple exchanged glances. The elderly woman turned slowly in her seat, her eyes trailing toward the back row, then quickly snapped forward again. She didn't look back a second time. A few minutes passed in suffocating silence. Then the young couple stood up. No explanation, no eye contact. They hit the signal button and stepped off at the next stop. Didn't even wait for the bus to fully come to a halt. They were gone, just like that. Now there were 7 people left. The driver, the conductor, the elderly woman, the silent man near the middle, and the 3 strangers in the back. Then, something happened. The elderly woman stood up. She looked shaken, pale. Then, without warning, she stepped forward and slapped the man sitting ahead of her across the back of the head. "You thief," she shouted. "You pickpocketing bastard! You stole my wallet!" The man jumped up, furious. "What the hell are you talking about? I didn't touch you." The conductor rushed over, shouting for calm, but the old woman was relentless. "He took it. I want to report him. Take us to the police station right now." The driver, irritated, pulled the bus over. "All right, both of you, off. Sort this out yourselves. We don't have time for this." The doors hissed open. The old woman grabbed the man by the arm and dragged him down the steps with surprising strength. The doors closed, and the bus drove away. But as the red tail lights faded into the dark, the elderly woman turned to the man she'd accused, and her expression changed. She let go of his arm and whispered, "I had to get you off that bus." He stared at her, stunned. "What?" "They're not alive," she said quietly, glancing down the road. "Those 3 men, they're not human." She didn't need to explain. He'd felt it too. The cold that had settled on the bus like a fog. The silence that seemed to stretch too long. The way the new passengers never blinked. They waited on the roadside in silence, watching the dark swallow the last glint of headlights. Neither of them spoke for a long, long time. When the bus pulled away, disappearing into the darkness, the man and the elderly woman stood frozen on the roadside. The cold bit deep, even through their coats. The streetlight above them flickered. For a long time, neither said a word. Then the man asked quietly, "How did you know?" The old woman didn't answer right away. She just stared down the road into the black where bus 375 had gone. Then slowly she said, "I was born near Xiangshan. Grew up around ghost stories. My grandmother used to say, 'Spirits don't walk like we do. Their feet don't touch the ground.'" The man shivered. "I saw it," she whispered, "when they passed me, just for a second. Their robes dragged, but their shoes—" She stopped. There were no footprints, no weight, no breath. She finally turned to him. "If you hadn't gotten off, you'd be dead by now." The man never learned her name. She refused to give it, said it was safer that way. She helped him flag down a cab, made sure he got home. Then she disappeared into the night. The next morning, bus 375 didn't arrive at the depot. There was no report, no radio call, no sign of a breakdown. It just vanished. Dispatch assumed it had been parked at a different yard. Delays happened. Miscommunication was common. But when they checked all the stations, no one had seen it. The route logs ended at 12:05 a.m., right after the bus passed the Haidian stretch, the last recorded stop. After that, nothing. No witnesses, no dash cam, no tire tracks, just silence. And that silence grew louder with each passing hour. By noon, police were involved. They sent patrols along the entire route. Helicopters scanned the wooded hillsides outside Xiangshan. There was no crash, no wreckage, just Nothing. 3 hours after the first report, a low-ranking officer made a quiet request: pull the records from past ghost sighting calls along that corridor. His request was denied, but someone leaked it. And by sundown, rumors were spreading fast. That night, a janitor working the graveyard shift at Beijing South Station was emptying trash when he saw something strange on the closed-circuit monitor. An unfamiliar vehicle pulled into the far lot, silent, slow. It was bus 375, the same route, same vehicle number, but there were no lights on, no driver, no movement. It just rolled to a stop and stayed there. The janitor called security. By the time they reached the lot, the bus was still running, engine purring softly, but no one was inside. No driver, no conductor, not a single passenger, just cold, empty seats. And the smell. The moment the doors opened, a wave of bitter, rotten air spilled out. So thick, one guard gagged. Inside, it felt wrong, damp, like the air had been sealed in too long, and in the very back row, where the 3 passengers had sat, there was a dark stain on the floor. Thick, oily, almost black. But it wasn't oil. It smelled like blood. No one spoke for a long time. Then a technician found something even worse. The fuel tank. It was full. But the fuel wasn't diesel. It was human blood. The city tried to bury the story. The incident was marked down as an equipment malfunction. No foul play was reported, no names released. The driver and conductor were declared missing, but their families were paid quiet settlements. The bus was quietly decommissioned. No official investigation was launched, but among the police, fire department, and public transit workers, whispers spread. They said the bus had gone missing for 24 hours, but when it was recovered, the engine was still warm. The seat cushions were damp with condensation, like there'd been people breathing inside, but no fingerprints, no skin cells, nothing. It was like they'd been there and then erased. One young officer who'd grown up in a small village near the mountains said something quietly over lunch to his superior. In old tales, when the dead walk among us, they don't move through space like we do. Time bends for them. And that should have been the end. But 2 weeks later, the man who'd been slapped by the old woman, the one who got off just in time, received a knock on his door. It was past midnight. He was already on edge, had barely slept since that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he dreamed of flickering lights and red silk. He didn't answer the door, but the knocking continued. Software steady, too rhythmic to be human. He waited until it stopped. In the morning, he opened the door. There were footprints on his porch, bare feet, burned into the wood like heat marks. No snow had fallen that night. No one else had been out. The prints were facing his door, but not away from it. No one walked up. No one left. Eventually, his story reached a local journalist, a woman named Chen Rui, who specialized in cultural legends. She interviewed him in private. He begged her not to publish his name, begged her not to reveal the old woman's face. But she was obsessed. Bus 375 was too well known to ignore. She wrote an article, half speculation, half investigation. She called it The Final Ride. It was published in a minor Beijing magazine, barely got any circulation. But 3 days after it hit print, Chen Rui disappeared. She was last seen entering a private charter bus, same route, same direction. Witnesses said she looked tired, distracted. She was seen boarding at 11:58 p.m. No record of her ever getting off. They say Bus 375 still drives the roads some nights, but not every night. Just the cold ones, the quiet ones. And if you see it, don't wave it down. Don't make eye contact and don't get on, because some passengers never leave, and some roads don't bring you home. 3 years passed. The story of Bus 375 became something else entirely. A rumor, a superstition, a warning whispered by night shift drivers and late-night travelers who'd heard the wrong thing from the wrong person. The Transit Authority never confirmed anything, but unofficially, Route 375 was changed, permanently. No more late routes past Changshan, no more midnight shifts through Haidian, and no bus in the fleet has carried the number 375 since. But the dead don't forget, and some wounds don't close just because the living stop looking. February 2025. A university student named Min Zhao was working on a thesis about modern folklore and mass hysteria. Her professor encouraged her to explore cultural phantoms, urban legends that took on lives of their own. Min chose Bus 375. She started by tracking down anyone who had lived near the old route. Most were reluctant to talk. A few hung up the moment she mentioned the number, but one woman agreed to meet her, an elderly resident in her 80s, living in a nursing home in the hills north of Beijing. Her voice was thin, her memory frayed. But when Min showed her a photo of the bus, an archival image taken just a week before it vanished, the woman froze. Then she whispered something in Mandarin Min didn't understand. Min asked her to repeat it. The old woman shook her head, then quietly slid a folded newspaper across the table. The headline was dated 2002. It was from a provincial publication, an obscure page near the back. The headline read, "Third bus vanishes on mountain route. No survivors found." Min didn't understand. There had only been one Bus 375 case. Hadn't there? She asked again. And the old woman finally spoke. Just 4 words. It always comes back. Back at the university, Min dug deeper. She found archived records, long thought deleted, old maintenance reports, driver incident logs, internal memos, heavily redacted. There was a pattern. Every 12 to 15 years, a transit vehicle went missing along the mountain route. Not always a bus, sometimes a cargo van. Once a medical shuttle, but the outcome was the same. Vanished, no wreckage, no bodies. Reappeared 24 to 48 hours later, empty, bloodied, and cold. Always on a moonless night, always with exactly 4 people on board. No more, no less. Min documented everything. She began writing a formal report, but halfway through her work, she began experiencing vivid dreams. Always the same. A bus, red silk robes, the sound of footsteps behind her that never made contact with the floor. She told herself it was stress, imagination, too much caffeine, too many hours spent in front of her screen. Until one night, she saw the bus herself, outside her dorm window, no lights, no driver, just idling there, facing the wrong way on a one-way street. She called campus security. By the time they arrived, it was gone. No tracks, no sound, nothing. Just cold air, and a red thread caught on the branch of a tree. Min dropped the project. She never submitted her thesis. She stopped answering emails. A year later, her professor received a small, unmarked envelope. Inside was a single photograph. An old woman sitting alone at a bus stop, her face hidden behind an umbrella. But the number on the bench beside her was clear, 375. To this day, some say the ghost bus still rides that road. Maybe not every night, maybe not every year. But when the air is cold and the moon is gone and the road is quiet, you might hear it. The low growl of an engine that doesn't burn fuel, the flick of fluorescent lights that don't draw power. And if you're unlucky enough to see it stop, don't wave it down, don't speak to the passengers, and for God's sake, don't get on, because the road it follows isn't on any map. And once you ride it, you never come back. It started when I took a job that I should have turned down. Not because the pay was bad or the boss was a nightmare, but because something about it just felt off. A family had just moved out of an old farmhouse outside Eugene, Oregon. I was hired to clear out the remaining junk, tear down some interior walls, and help prep it for renovation. They told me it had been vacant for years before the family moved in. They only lasted 6 months. They left in a hurry, my contractor Rob said. Didn't even take most of their furniture. I asked why they left. He just looked at me and shrugged, like he didn't want to say it out loud. But I'd already accepted. I needed the money, and it wasn't like I was scared of creaky old houses. At least, I hadn't been. The place was secluded, surrounded by thick pine trees, the kind of place where cell service disappears the moment you hit the driveway. The front porch sagged, the windows were dirty, and a strange smell, like wet ash and rot, hung in the air even before I stepped inside. Day one went quietly enough. I hauled out boxes of dusty books, broken furniture, and old toys. Most of the upstairs was untouched, like the family just never unpacked. But one room was different. The nursery. The crib had claw marks on it. I stared at them for a long time, trying to figure out what kind of animal could have gotten in and done that. The rest of the house didn't show signs of damage. No raccoons, no busted windows, just that one room, and those deep, deliberate gouges in the crib rail. I almost asked Rob about it, but something told me not to. The second night, I stayed late. I was installing some temporary supports in the kitchen when I heard footsteps above me. Heavy ones, too heavy to be a raccoon. I froze, holding my breath, listening. The steps moved down the hall toward the top of the stairs. Then nothing, just silence. I crept upstairs with a crowbar in my hand, calling out, "Hello? Anyone here?" No response. I checked every room. Empty. But the nursery door, which I'd left open, was now shut. My stomach dropped. I reached for the knob and slowly pushed the door open. Everything looked exactly the same, except for one thing. The crib had been turned around to face the window. I was sure I hadn't done that. And on the window pane, someone had drawn a crude handprint in the dust. 5 long fingers. Longer than mine. I told myself I was just tired, that I must have bumped the crib and stirred up the dust. I locked the front door and left. Didn't sleep a wink that night. The next day, I brought my dog, Scout. He's a 90-pound shepherd mix and has never met a stranger he didn't like. But the second we pulled up to the house, his ears went back. He refused to get out of the truck. I tried everything, treats, a leash, calling him over and over. He just stared at the house, growling low in his throat. That was the first time I thought about quitting. Instead, I left Scout in the truck with the windows cracked and went inside. The air felt thicker, heavier, like the house was holding its breath. I went straight to the nursery. The crib was gone. I stood in the doorway for a long time, trying to process it. I hadn't moved it. Rob hadn't been back. And it was a solid oak crib. It would have taken effort to haul out. The only thing left in the room was a single baby shoe sitting in the middle of the floor. It hadn't been there before. That's when I decided to check the basement. I'd been avoiding it. The stairs were narrow and steep, and the light switch didn't work. I had to use my flashlight. The basement was unfinished, just dirt and exposed beams. Old jars of canned peaches lined one wall, all long since rotted. But in the far corner, behind a stack of rusted tools, I found it. The crib, smashed to pieces, like something had torn it apart with bare hands. I backed away slowly, and that's when I heard the whispering. Right behind me. So close I felt the breath on my neck. I spun around. Nothing. No one. I got the hell out of there. That night, I went through my phone. I'd taken some photos of the rooms on the first day for documentation. But when I pulled them up, my stomach twisted. Every photo of the nursery was corrupted, glitched, just blackness and static. Every other room looked fine. The next morning, I showed up to find the front door wide open. It had been locked. I double-checked it the night before. Inside, the house was freezing cold, like walking into a meat locker. And something had changed. Someone, or something, had written all over the walls, words scratched in jagged, frantic letters. I hear it crawling. The baby never slept. It lives in the walls. And worst of all, on the inside of the nursery door, etched in what looked like dried blood. "Don't look at it." I stood there, frozen, until Rob arrived. He walked in, took one look around, and just nodded like it confirmed everything he already knew. "I figured it might come back once people started poking around," he said. "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked. He sighed, pulled out a cigarette, and lit it. "Back in '87, there was a family here, the Kellers. They had a little boy. Something happened. They said he stopped sleeping, just laid there in his crib, eyes wide open, screaming every night. What happened to them?" "Fire," Rob said. "Burned the whole nursery. Fire department said it started in the crib. No one made it out." I didn't believe him. Not at first, but that night I stayed in the house. I wanted to see for myself. I brought a sleeping bag, a thermos of coffee, and a camcorder I set up in the nursery. Just me, the dark, and whatever was in that house. Around 2 a.m., the temperature dropped. My breath fogged in the air. Then I heard it, crawling, behind the walls, like fingernails on wood. I stood up, flashlight shaking in my hand, and aimed it at the nursery. The door slammed shut. I ran toward it, grabbing the handle. It was burning hot. I kicked it open, yelling, but the room was empty. Except the crib was back, reassembled, clean, like new. And there was something in it. I stepped closer. It was a bundle of blankets, swaddled tight, silent. I reached out, trembling, and pulled back the edge. There was no baby, just a mass of black hair, wet, tangled, moving. I staggered back and the lights went out. In the dark, I heard it breathing, then whispering, "Don't look at it." I turned and ran. Didn't stop until I was back in my truck, Scout barking like mad in the back seat. I haven't been back since, but every night since then I hear it, crawling in the walls, wherever I go. I didn't know if I was going crazy or if the house was really doing something to me. Every time I tried to tell myself it was just the isolation, the exhaustion, or my overactive imagination, I could still hear the crawling. At first it was faint, just a rustle here and there, like rats in the walls. But then it grew louder, more distinct, almost like footsteps. I didn't sleep for days. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that crib, empty but full of something just beyond my understanding. Every night I kept hearing the whispers, too. That same voice, soft and childlike, but sharp as broken glass. "Don't look at it." But it wasn't until I went back to the house to try to figure out what had happened to me that I truly understood what it wanted. I told myself I needed answers. I had to finish the job. It was just a job, after all. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I knew something wasn't right. Rob had warned me to stay away, but I was too stubborn. I wanted to face whatever had been tormenting me, and maybe, just maybe, I could make it stop. I arrived at the house in the early morning, the sun still low on the horizon. The fog was thick, almost like the air itself was holding its breath. I could barely make out the outline of the house as I approached. The door was ajar. I hadn't opened it. I stepped inside and everything felt wrong. It was too quiet, too still. There was no sign of the usual dampness in the air, no creaking floorboards. The house felt alive, watching. I walked toward the stairs and then stopped. There, in the living room, was something that hadn't been there before. A rocking chair. I hadn't noticed it before, but now it sat in the corner, facing the hallway that led to the nursery. The chair was gently rocking back and forth, creaking on its own. I couldn't look away. Every instinct in me screamed to turn around, to leave. But my feet moved forward, slowly, without me realizing it. I reached out, almost by accident, and touched the back of the chair. It was ice cold. That's when I heard it again. The crawling. It was behind me, no longer in the walls. No. Now it was in the floor, beneath the wooden boards, inching closer with every passing second. I felt the vibrations through my feet, but I couldn't move. The chair creaked again, louder this time. I whipped around, expecting to see something, but there was nothing, only the rocking chair. I breathed in deep, forcing myself to move past it. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, the whispers returned, but this time they weren't soft. They were louder, insistent. Don't look at it. Don't look at it. Don't look at it. My heart pounded in my chest, but my feet kept moving. I had to know. I reached the nursery door and pushed it open. And that's when everything changed. It was worse than before. The crib was back, but it wasn't just in the center of the room anymore. It was in the corner, facing the window. But the thing that really made my blood freeze was the reflection in the glass. There was a face behind me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I saw it in the window. A pale, gaunt face with sunken eyes and blackened lips, mouth open wide in a silent scream. But it wasn't just a reflection. It was real. It was there, standing behind me, inches away. The whispers grew louder, faster. It sees you. It sees you now. You looked at it. You looked at it. I spun around and the room was empty. No one was there. I was alone. But I wasn't. I felt something, cold, clammy, brush against my cheek, like fingers. Fingers that shouldn't have been there. Fingers that weren't human. I staggered back, slamming into the crib. My heart was racing. My breath was shallow, panicked. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a broken piece of wood from the crib, and swung it blindly. There was nothing to hit. The whispers turned into laughter, children's laughter. High-pitched, shrill, and then a deep, guttural growl, like something was standing just behind me, ready to devour me. I turned to run, but the door slammed shut. I couldn't see the handle, couldn't see anything. It was dark, too dark. The air grew thick again, that stifling, suffocating feeling wrapping around me. I had to get out. I scrambled for the window. The glass was cold, sticky with condensation. I shoved it open with everything I had, and the second I was through, the air rushed at me, fresh and alive. But that wasn't the worst part. When I landed in the yard, I looked up at the house. The upstairs window was open. There, standing in the shadows, was a figure, small, hunched, almost like a child. And behind it, in the reflection of the glass, were two more figures, bigger, taller, watching. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I turned and ran to my truck, not caring if Scout was still inside. I drove away fast, not looking back, not even slowing down as I passed the entrance to the long dirt road that led to the house. I haven't been back since. But even now, when I'm driving down a lonely stretch of road in the middle of the night, I sometimes think I see something in the rearview mirror. A figure, small and hunched, just watching. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I can hear that whispering. Don't look at it. I don't know what's in that house, but I know one thing for sure. It doesn't want to be seen, and it wants me dead. I drive long haul for a living. Nothing glamorous, just a single rig. Basic routes, mostly between small towns in the Pacific Northwest. It pays the bills and keeps me away from people, which I prefer. Too many years in the military left me with a taste for solitude and an instinct for danger. You learn to trust your gut. That's what kept me alive overseas. and I should have listened to it more closely that night. It was early October. I'd taken a job hauling a half-load of equipment down through northern Idaho, cutting across into Oregon, and then on to a small outpost town near the California border. I'd driven those roads before. Narrow highways that slithered through forests so thick your headlights only reach about 20 feet before the trees swallow the light. The job was routine. Leave Spokane by late afternoon, make it through the winding forest stretch just before midnight, and park at a truck stop I knew near Klamath. But around 7 p.m., I stopped to grab gas at a remote station just past the Washington-Idaho border. There was only one pump. The place looked abandoned, save for an old woman inside sipping tea behind a dusty window. She didn't say anything when I paid, just handed me a receipt and looked past me like she saw something standing behind me. As I was leaving, I noticed her mouthing something. No sound, just her lips moving slowly. I didn't ask. Should've. I figured she was just one of those old folks with a 1,000-yard stare and a mind stuck in memories. But now, I wonder if she was trying to warn me. About an hour later, I was deep in the woods. No cell service, no traffic, just me, the hum of the engine, and the vast curtain of pine trees pressing in from both sides. It was fully dark now, the kind of darkness that feels like a presence. You know the kind, like it's watching you. I flicked on the high beams and turned up the radio to stay awake. That's when I saw it, a man standing at the edge of the road. At first, I thought it was just a hitchhiker, except he wasn't moving, just standing there, stiff, arms at his sides, his face turned away from the light. He wore a long coat, too long for his frame, and something in the way he stood made my stomach clench. I slowed down instinctively, but didn't stop. As I passed, I got a clearer look at his face, only there wasn't one. No eyes, no nose, just smooth skin like clay before it's shaped. I blinked, thinking maybe it was a trick of the light, but by then I was already past him. I sped up. I didn't even want to glance in the mirrors. A few miles down, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Probably just a tree stump or someone in a mask. Halloween wasn't far off. People did stupid stuff this time of year. Then I saw him again. Same side of the road, same posture. But this time he was closer to the center line. I slammed the brakes. Hard. There's no way he could have gotten ahead of me. I hadn't passed any turnoffs and I was doing 60. I sat there, foot on the brake, engine idling, staring at him in the high beams. The figure didn't move. But the more I looked, the more wrong he felt. His coat, it shimmered slightly, like it wasn't made of fabric, more like skin pulled tight. There was something unnatural about the way his arms hung, too long, too stiff. Then the radio cut out, static, nothing but white noise. And in the static, for just a second, I swear I heard whispering. A voice, distant and muffled, saying my name. I floored it. No looking back. I kept driving, didn't stop for anything. But the forest felt different now, like the trees were leaning in, like something was running parallel to me through the brush. About 20 minutes later, the road curved sharply left and passed over an old one-lane bridge. I was gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles had gone white. As I crossed the bridge, I glanced in the rear view. He was standing in the middle of it. No expression. Just standing, coat flapping slightly in a breeze I couldn't feel. I didn't see him again for the rest of the drive, but that wasn't the end of it. When I finally reached the truck stop, I parked and went straight to the diner inside. I needed to see people, hear voices, something to break the sense of dread that had settled over me like a second skin. There was a waitress, mid-40s, kind eyes, used to dealing with jittery truckers. She poured me a coffee and asked if I was all right. I told her what I saw. Not everything, but enough. The man, the face, the coat. Her face went pale, real pale. She reached under the counter, pulled out a crumpled newspaper clipping, and handed it to me. The headline read, "Trucker disappears on Route 95. Cab found abandoned, no sign of driver." The photo was of a familiar stretch of road, the same place I'd seen him. She told me this wasn't the first time someone had reported seeing a faceless man along that route. It happened once or twice every October. The ones who stopped and picked him up, they didn't come back. The locals called it the Watcher, a spirit, or maybe something worse. It didn't chase you, it didn't scream, it just appeared, and every time you saw it, it got closer. You weren't supposed to acknowledge it. Don't look at it. Don't talk about it. Just drive and hope it forgets you. I asked her if she'd ever seen it. She didn't answer, just poured more coffee and walked away. I finished my route, but I haven't taken that highway since. Sometimes, though, late at night, when I'm parked in some lot far from the city and the forest starts to whisper, I get this crawling feeling up my spine, like something is watching me from just outside the range of my headlights. And once, just once, I saw a figure standing at the tree line, not moving, just waiting. I didn't look too close. I don't think I want to know if he remembered me. I was about 2 hours into my drive when I noticed the gas gauge dipping lower than I remembered. It was already pushing midnight, and I was somewhere deep in the northeastern part of Oregon, where cell service flickers like a dying light bulb and the forest presses tight against the road on both sides. I was headed to visit my uncle, who lives off-grid near Joseph, and I'd taken the scenic route because I liked the quiet. No traffic, no billboards, no lights, just my van humming beneath me and the black pines rising like walls. I don't scare easily. Living out of a van means you get used to being alone in strange places. You tune in to your surroundings. You pay attention to odd sounds, but you also learn when something's just in your head. I remember the moment the road shifted from smooth asphalt to cracked, weathered pavement. It was like the woods had swallowed the road whole. The trees leaned in. My headlights barely cut through the darkness, and there were no road markers, no mile signs, just the dim reflection of my own high beams against the fog that had started to creep up from the trees. Then I saw her. She stood on the side of the road, her back turned to me, a pale figure barely illuminated in the halo of my lights. Long, tangled hair hung past her shoulders, and she wore something white that looked like it had once been a dress, now stained and torn. I slowed down. Instinct, I guess. My foot hovered over the brake, and my brain did the quick calculation between doing the right thing and not dying tonight. Something about her didn't fit. I stopped a few yards ahead and leaned toward the passenger window. I was about to roll it down, ask if she needed help, but she hadn't turned around. She stood there like a statue. "Hey," I called out. Nothing. I hesitated for a moment. Something told me not to get out, not to open the door. I reached over, locked all 4 doors instead. That's when she moved. Not walked, moved. 1 second she was standing by the tree line, the next she was 6 feet closer. No sound, no footsteps, just there. My stomach dropped. I slammed my foot on the gas. My van lurched forward, tires squealing slightly on the damp road. I didn't look back. 10 minutes passed before I let myself breathe again. Just forest now, no sign of her. I told myself it could have been anything, a trick of the lights, someone playing a prank, a tired brain misfiring after a long drive. But I still checked the rearview mirror every few seconds. That's when the lights started flickering. I don't mean a mechanical flicker, like something wrong with the alternator. I mean they dimmed unnaturally, pulsing, almost like they were responding to something external. The dashboard lights, too. My radio crackled, though I hadn't had it on since I left town. Then the van jerked hard to the right. I gripped the wheel and wrestled it back into my lane. It felt like I'd hit something, but there was no bump, no noise, just a sudden, violent pull. I slowed down and pulled off to the side. That's when I heard it. A soft tapping. I froze. It wasn't on the window. It was on the roof. I sat there, heart thudding, breath caught in my throat. I turned the ignition off, killed the lights, and sat in total darkness. Tap, 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 like fingernails. Deliberate, slow. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I remembered stories, urban legends about hitchhikers, things on the roof of cars, but this didn't feel like a story. It felt real. Too real. Then everything stopped. Silence. I held it together just long enough to flick the lights back on, throw the van into gear, and speed down the road like hell was behind me. For the next 30 minutes, I didn't see a single car, house, or road sign. Just forest. Endless, suffocating forest. I kept telling myself, "You're just tired. You imagined it. She's not real." Then I passed her again. Same side of the road, same white dress. Only this time she was facing me. Her face was wrong. It wasn't just pale, it was void of detail, like someone had wiped away her features with wet paint. But there were eyes. Deep, black, wide eyes. Too big for her face. Unblinking. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I didn't look back. Eventually, the road widened. The forest thinned. I saw a dim yellow light ahead. A small gas station closed, but the pumps were working. I pulled in, more for the sense of safety than for fuel. I topped off the tank with shaking hands and parked under the fluorescent lights. I considered staying there until sunrise, but after 30 minutes, I started to feel like the shadows behind the station were watching me. The silence became too loud, so I kept driving. The next hour was quiet. The forest gave way to open hills, and my cell service returned. I thought I was in the clear, but something in me had shifted. That encounter, it wasn't just strange. It felt targeted, like she wasn't just a ghost on the road. She was waiting for me. I got to my uncle's cabin just before 3 a.m. He's a no-nonsense kind of guy, former ranger. I told him what I saw, expected him to laugh. He didn't. He poured us both a drink and sat down, staring into the fire. "About 10 years ago," he said slowly, "a woman died on that stretch. Car broke down in the middle of the night. She walked to find help. Nobody ever found her. No body. Just her car, doors open, lights still on. Folks around here say she never really left." I didn't sleep that night. For the next few days, I stayed close to the cabin. Didn't drive anywhere, didn't even go near the road after dark. But I kept seeing things out of the corner of my eye. Pale movement near the tree line. Long hair. A white dress. I told myself it was paranoia, that maybe I'd just been shaken up. But it didn't stop. One night I was sitting outside by the fire, trying to relax. No wind, no moon. Just the crackle of the flames. Then I heard gravel shifting. I turned toward the road. She was there, just beyond the reach of the firelight, not moving, watching. I didn't go inside. I didn't call for my uncle. I just stared back. Eventually, she turned and walked into the woods. I never saw her again after that. But I never took that road again either. And if you ever find yourself out that way, somewhere between La Grande and Joseph, and you see a woman in white standing by the trees, don't stop. Don't slow down. And whatever you do, don't look into her eyes. I used to take the long way home on purpose. It's not that I liked driving the extra miles, but after a long shift at the ER, I needed the silence. The back route from the hospital wound through the coastal mountains of southern Oregon, dense fir forests, switchback roads, and barely any signal. Just you, the road, and the kind of darkness that eats your headlights. That night, it was almost 1 a.m. when I left the hospital parking lot. I remember the clock because I was checking it, calculating how little sleep I'd get before I had to be back. My eyes were gritty. My body ached from standing for 12 hours straight. But I wasn't ready to go home and lie awake in silence. I needed to decompress. The first half of the drive was uneventful. Music low, one hand on the wheel, headlights cutting through mist. I remember passing the old highway sign for Miller Creek, just a rusted green slab barely clinging to its post, and thinking again that the county should really take it down. No one lived out there anymore. The last house I remembered seeing along that stretch had burned down years ago. After that, it was nothing but trees. About 10 minutes past the sign, I saw something on the shoulder. At first, I thought it was an animal. A deer, maybe, or one of the wild dogs that sometimes roamed the forest. But as I got closer, I realized it was a person, a woman. She was standing at the edge of the road, just outside the reach of my high beams. Not moving, no flashlight, no car, just standing there. I slowed down instinctively, trying to make sense of it. She didn't look injured. She wasn't waving for help. She didn't even seem to notice me. She was facing away, staring into the trees. Long hair, pale arms, no coat, even though it was near freezing. I rolled to a stop maybe 30 feet past her. My hands hovered over the wheel. I should have kept driving. Every instinct told me that. But I'm a nurse, and we don't walk away from people who might be hurt. So I backed up slowly, keeping her in my peripheral vision, half expecting her to turn around or run off. But she didn't. When I got level with her, I rolled down the passenger window. "Ma'am," I called, "are you okay?" She didn't respond, didn't flinch. "Do you need help?" Nothing. I considered getting out of the car, but something about the whole thing felt off. Her stillness, her bare feet, the way she stood too straight, like someone posing for a photograph. Then I noticed something that made my skin crawl. She wasn't breathing. I know that sounds insane. But when you've worked in trauma as long as I have, you can tell. I watched her back, her ribs, not a twitch, not a shift. It was like she was a mannequin. And then she moved. Not a slow turn or a stumble. One second she was facing the woods, and the next, she was looking directly at me. I hit the gas. My tires screeched on the damp asphalt as I pulled away. I didn't look in the mirror. I didn't want to know if she was following me. I just drove. Faster than I should have, curves be damned. 10 minutes later, I passed the old ranger station, boarded up and empty. The light above the door flickered as I drove by. I don't remember seeing that light on before. Another 5 minutes and I was in range of cell service. I called dispatch and asked them to send someone out to check on a possible pedestrian along Miller Creek Road. Gave them the mile marker, hung up. I didn't tell them what I really saw. I just said it looked like a woman might need help. When I got home, I double-locked my door and turned every light on in the house. I kept telling myself I was just tired, hallucinating, that it was a real person and my brain had just filled in the blanks with something weird. The next day, I called the sheriff's office for an update. They said they sent a unit out, but they didn't find anyone. No footprints, no tire tracks, just an empty road. I didn't take the back route again. For a while, that was the end of it, but a few weeks later, something else happened. I was covering a late shift. One of the other nurses, a young guy named Chris, came in late, pale and shaking. He said he'd hit something on the road coming in from the north side, near Miller Creek. He swore it was a deer, but when he got out to check, there was nothing there. Not even a dent in the bumper. He looked down the road and he said he saw a woman standing under a tree, barefoot, soaking wet. She smiled at him. Then she vanished. He refused to drive home that way again. Over the next couple months, 3 more people from the hospital had similar stories. Always the same area. Always the same woman. Sometimes she appeared in the road, sometimes off to the side. Once, someone said she was crouched on top of a guardrail, like some kind of animal. Word got around. We started calling her the Miller Creek Woman. I thought maybe she was a ghost, an urban legend. Maybe someone had died out there years ago and we were all just catching echoes. I even tried to look it up, missing persons, old murders, but there was nothing. No woman reported missing in that area. No accident. Nothing. Then, one night, I got curious. I don't know why. Maybe I was just tired of being afraid. I left work just after midnight and turned onto Miller Creek Road, windows down. No music, just the sound of the tires in the forest. I slowed down when I got near the old sign. For a while, nothing happened. The road was empty, silent. Then I saw her, not standing this time, sitting. Right in the middle of the road, knees tucked to her chest, hair hanging in front of her face. I stopped the car. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I thought if I faced her, it would stop. Maybe I thought I could help her, somehow. I got out, left the engine running, took 2 steps forward. She didn't move. I said, "I see you." She lifted her head. Her face, if you can call it that, was wrong. Too long, eyes too wide, skin like wax paper. Her mouth was open, too far, as if she were trying to scream, but no sound came out. Then she crawled toward me. Not walked, crawled. Fast. Hands slapping the asphalt. I ran. I barely made it into the car before she reached me. Slammed the door, threw it in reverse, peeled out. She hit the side of the car, hard, left a handprint. I still have it. A greasy, pale smudge on the back window that wouldn't wash off, no matter what I tried. I don't take that road anymore. None of us do. And here's the thing. About a month ago, someone did some digging. Found an old forum post from 2003. A guy talking about a woman he saw walking along that road. Said she looked lost. Said he tried to help her. Next day, his car was found upside down in the ravine. He was never found. Sometimes I wonder if she's stuck out there. A loop playing over and over, looking for someone to see her. A face to wear. Sometimes I wonder if she found mine. I'm not sure what happened to the guy who posted that forum entry. After he shared his story, the post disappeared, gone without a trace. But something about it stuck with me. His words lingered in the back of my mind, gnawing at me like a bug I couldn't shake. Looking for someone to see her. I couldn't stop thinking about that. After all, if she wanted someone to see her, then why was she going after people who didn't stop? I had driven past her that first night, didn't I? But I'd turned around. I had stopped to check on her, and I had been the one to turn away. What if I hadn't? What if that was the tipping point for me? What if that was all it took for her to lock onto me? A few days after reading the post, I started getting the feeling that I wasn't alone in my house. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my sheets twisted around my legs, heart racing for no reason. And I'd hear it, soft sounds, scratching against the walls. At first, I thought it was the wind, or a tree branch, or an animal, but it wasn't. I'd get up and check, but there was nothing there, nothing out of place, no marks, no signs of anything. But every time I turned off the lights and crawled back into bed, the scratching would start again. Then, one night, I woke up to something even worse. I heard it clearer this time, closer. The sounds were right outside my window. It was almost rhythmic, like tapping, soft at first, but growing more insistent. And then it stopped. That's when I saw it. I was lying on my side, my back to the window, but when I turned over, I saw something standing there, right outside. A figure. In the dark, barely visible, but I could make out the outline. Thin. Gaunt. It wasn't the Miller Creek woman, or at least, it didn't look like her. But something about it felt familiar. The same feeling I had when I first saw her, the The same cold, creeping sensation that burrows deep into your chest. The feeling of being watched. I froze. For a few long seconds, it just stood there. And then it moved. Not toward me, not directly. It was like it couldn't move forward, but it kept shifting, left, right, flickering in and out of the shadow, as if something was wrong with it. Like it was glitching, warping. The figure blurred at the edges, and for a brief moment I saw its face. But it wasn't a face anymore. It was something more like a hole, dark and endless, like it was pulling the light into it. I screamed. I scrambled out of bed, tripping over the blankets, and bolted for the door. My heart was pounding so loud I thought it would tear through my chest. But the figure didn't follow me. Not at first. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking as I dialed the sheriff's office. But when they answered, the voice on the other end was wrong. It wasn't the usual officer I talked to. It sounded like it had been distorted, stretched out of shape. "Sheriff's office," the voice said, but it wasn't a greeting. It was flat, empty. I hung up. I don't know how long I stood there in the hallway just staring at the phone, but when I finally dared to look back toward the window, the figure was gone. Just like that. I tried to convince myself it was just exhaustion, that I had imagined the whole thing. But the next night I heard it again. The tapping, the scratching. I knew then that whatever was out there wasn't just something I could forget. It wasn't just a bad dream or a hallucination. It was something else, something I couldn't outrun no matter how far I drove or how fast I ran. That's when I decided to go back to Miller Creek Road. I hadn't planned on it, but something was drawing me back. Maybe it was the need for answers. Maybe I thought I could face whatever this thing was and finally get rid of it. Or maybe I just needed closure. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving at all. I packed a small bag, some water, a flashlight, a couple of old blankets, just in case, and drove out there at night, hoping I could keep the lights on long enough to drive past the spot without seeing her, without feeling her eyes on me. But the closer I got, the more I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in. The woods around me were too thick, the trees too close. I felt like I was being swallowed. When I reached the spot where I had first seen her, I pulled off the road and parked. The air was heavy with the scent of wet leaves and moss. The ground was soft beneath my feet as I got out of the car. I shone the flashlight around, half expecting to see her standing just out of reach, waiting for me. But she wasn't there. I stood for a while, just listening to the silence. It felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to make a move. That's when I heard the first sound, a whisper, barely audible, carried on the wind. It was coming from the trees. "Help!" I froze, heart in my throat. It wasn't her voice. It didn't sound like the Miller Creek woman at all. It was something else, something younger. I followed the sound, stepping through the underbrush, feeling the damp earth squelch beneath my boots. The further I went, the more I heard it, clearer, louder. The whisper was turning into a cry, a desperate, pleading cry. And then I saw it. Not a woman, not a person, a child. Barefoot, shivering, crouched on the ground, her hands pressed against her ears as if trying to block something out. She didn't look up when I approached. Didn't move. I kneeled beside her, reaching out. And then her head snapped up. It wasn't a child at all. It was something worse, twisted like it had been hollowed out, the face stretched and jagged, a wide grin splitting it open. It was the face of the Miller Creek woman. I stumbled back, my body crashing against the bark of a tree. The thing, the creature, rose slowly, and in one swift motion it moved toward me. Crawling, sliding over the ground on its hands and feet, its grin widening, its mouth opening too wide, too far. I ran again, but this time it didn't stop. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I just ran, feeling my chest burn as I pushed my legs harder. I reached the car, scrambled inside, and floored the gas pedal, not daring to glance at the rearview mirror. I didn't stop until I got home, and I didn't sleep. Now I avoid that road altogether. I avoid looking at the trees, at the shadows. Every time I close my eyes, I hear that whisper again. Help. I don't know how many others she's taken out there, how many people have seen her or tried to help her. But I do know one thing now. If you hear her whisper, it's too late. You're already hers.